Cax Prime had counted 3,000 ships arrive that morning. He would count considerably fewer leave it. 2 years later, he still told the story starting in the same place. Not with the moon, not with the woman's voice, but with his own hands on the console, refusing to shake, 10 seconds before the universe rewrote its rules. That morning, Earth had been a joke. A blue rock with 30 patched-together destroyers, a species 6 months into faster-than-light travel, and still celebrating a robot that hadn't exploded on its own moon. Commander Vex 9 told the joke often enough that his crew laughed on cue, his grandmother's houseplant. He liked to say, could take the system with a rusted pipe and a bad attitude. Cax Prime laughed along, the way you laugh at your commander's jokes when your career depends on it. Then the scanner threw up a number that made no sense, and the laughing stopped for good. An installation on Earth's moon, 100 kilometers across, drawing more power than the planet should have been able to generate. Vex 9 waved it off, children playing with borrowed tools, until Admiral Crex Prime opened the shared channel to 7 converging fleets and delivered numbers that emptied every bridge of noise. A rail cannon, 157 kilometers long, tapping the planet's own magnetic field, throwing a projectile at just under light speed. At that speed, Crex Prime said, mass stopped mattering. They could fire a stone and erase a continent. Cax Prime watched Vex 9's hands go still on the armrest. Too still, the way a man holds himself when he's decided not to let anyone see him shake. A woman's voice arrived on every channel at once, unhurried as someone ordering tea. Admiral Sarah Vance introduced herself, informed 3,000 ships they were trespassing, and gave them 30 minutes to leave. Somewhere on the Crystal Lord's bridge, someone laughed. 200 human hulls, mostly cargo haulers wearing weapons as an afterthought, against 7 governments that had never once lost a war of conquest. Vex 9 opened a private channel and offered mercy. Surrender now, keep your planet as a client world. Thank you for volunteering to be our demonstration, Vance said. 3 seconds later the moon fired, and the cruiser Unlimited Power stopped existing. Not wreckage, nothing. A bloom of plasma where 600 crew and a kilometer of hull had been a heartbeat before. Vance's voice came back, pleasant as ever, informing them that shot had been reduced power and that 29 minutes remained. What followed wasn't a battle. It was an accounting. 3 more installations lit across the system, Mars, the Belt, a platform drifting near Jupiter, while Vance narrated the countdown like a hostess checking on her guests. When Chancellor Vorth Prime patched in demanding negotiation, she read him a list instead. Every species his council's empires had ground down across 3,000 years, one name at a time, and let the silence after each one do the cutting. Your intelligence is remarkably detailed for a species 6 months out of its own gravity well, Crex Prime said. Careful now, no longer performing confidence. You've been talking about us, Vance answered. We've been talking to the people you conquered. That silence lasted longer than the first one. Cax Prime watched something behind Vex 9's eyes finish collapsing, the arithmetic completing itself in real time. Refugees. Survivors of a dozen dead worlds, scattered and patient, who had found their way to a planet nobody was watching and taught it everything they knew. You assumed we built this alone, Vance said. That was the mistake. 3,000 years of enemies, Chancellor. Some of them lived long enough to reach us. With 4 minutes on her clock, she gave them the rest of it. The tactical display filled with fresh contacts, not near Sol, but scattered across a dozen systems the Council had called pacified, fleets converging on capital worlds while their commanders had been out here insulting a planet of primates. Every resistance cell and refugee ship in the galaxy, she said, had spent the last year arming with the same technology now pointed at the eternal spite. This is not a negotiation, Vorth Prime said, and for the first time in 3,000 years his voice cracked on air. This is a revolution. You're welcome to call it that, Vance said. 30 seconds left. Cax Prime remembers this part most clearly of anything that happened that day. Vex 9 rising out of his chair on legs that didn't want to hold him, looking around at a crew that had never once seen him afraid, now watching him to learn whether he'd let them die for a joke about a houseplant. I surrender, he said, before the number reached 0. The moon fired anyway. 1 kilometer off their hull, close enough to shatter half the sensor array, far enough to leave them breathing. The shot continued on and found an empty asteroid farther out, and the asteroid simply stopped being an object in the universe, leaving a light bright enough to read by from 3 systems away. Refreshing, Vance said. Prepare to be boarded, Commander. The rest of you have 12 hours to clear our system before we grow impatient. The boarding itself, Cax Prime, remembers only in pieces. Human soldiers moving through the wreck of KTHVAR pried with a briskness that felt, unsettlingly, close to mercy. What he remembers whole is standing at the observation deck as the shuttle carrying his commander pulled away, and 3,000 ships from 7 empires began the least dignified retreat in galactic memory. Formations that had arrived in contemptuous order dissolved into something closer to a stampede. Nobody fired. Nobody had anything left to fire with that would matter. He remembers, too, what came after, the months nobody talks about as much as the 30 minutes on the moon. The capital worlds burning behind commanders who'd left home certain of an easy conquest and returned to find their own thrones on fire. The council convening emergency session after emergency session, each one smaller than the last, as system after system declared itself no longer theirs to govern. Vex 9 was returned 11 weeks later, quieter than the man who'd left, carrying nothing but the message Vance had promised, that the age of easy conquest was finished and would not be coming back. Cax Prime tells the story that way now, every time, and every time he ends it in the same place. Not with the speeches the council gave afterward about a new order nobody had asked for, not with the treaties or the tribunals or any of what the historians care about. He ends it with the thing he actually saw, standing at that cracked observation glass, while the eternal spite limped toward the system's edge. One small human shuttle, unarmed, unhurried, crossing the wreckage of a fleet that had called itself unbeatable that morning, and never once slowing down to check if anyone behind it was still watching.